Hello and welcome to our first edition of the Morning Serve. It's great to be with you. Sam Groth joins me. Grothy, great to have you on board again.
I spent plenty of time with you in the commentary box. It's nice to be here now.
Great to be outdoors. Grothy, what about the fact we don't have Novak Djokovic here? That's been the big story leading into this tournament. The last time he didn't play at an Australian Open, no Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. They didn't exist. The world was a simpler place.
Oh, well, it would have been simpler if things had been taken care of before he got out to Australia. But, of course, no Novak. I mean, it's been the biggest talking point in the lead up to the tournament. I'm glad it's dealt with now, though, and we're into the real tennis. It's great to see tennis played at Melbourne Park. We had a fantastic crowd in day one, great weather for the players, and of course, some big-name wins.
There were some massive wins on the opening day, but just back on Novak, do you think we're going to see him in other Grand Slams for the rest of the year, or is this going to be a precursor of what's to come?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult because we know, for example, in France, that the French president is making it really difficult for unvaccinated people. We know New York has vaccine mandates. I think as the year goes on, it's going to get harder and harder for unvaccinated players to travel around. So what decision Novak makes is up to him, but I think he's also got to understand the consequences that go with that. So, only time will tell. I keep getting asked the question about how Novak's going to come back here next year, but I think there's just so much to play out in the next 12 months before we actually even think about AO 2023.
I was going to say, so too early to make that call. You're not sure whether or not we'll see him back at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, with obviously the decision that was made by the federal court, he's got that 3-year ban, but that can be overlooked by the government. Look, I really don't know, because we don't know how 2022 is going to play out. I think maybe he does go and get vaccinated, even though he's been quite strong against it. Maybe he sees that as the only way he can actually travel around and keep playing. But, I do think it's too early to call.
I'm sure you've been hit up by a lot of international media looking for a response over here. How do you think the Open has been perceived? Some people critical of the government, etc. How do you think people will perceive the Australian Open as an event after all of this?
Oh, I mean, hopefully we can end up just talking about tennis.
Yeah.
I think it's moved past being just an Australian Open talking point. It's definitely, become a bit of he said, she said, blaming from all the different organisations. But, all you have to do is wander around the site here and see the fans and see how good Melbourne Park is looking. And obviously the people who aren't on site and the people from overseas can't see that. But, full credit to all of Craig Tiley and his team for getting the site ready. I'm sure they would have liked to maybe handle parts of the Novak drama differently, and hindsight's always 20/20, isn't it? But in terms of the site and the actual event that's taking place now, I mean, construction's done. We've got new stadiums that have gone up. We've got the beach house this year.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have the fences and the bollards keeping crowds out from areas like we had last year. In terms of the way the site looks, I think the venue's looking as good as it ever has.
And you're one of the great analysts of the game. We love your commentary. Do you think, crystal ball, Novak wins another Grand Slam?
I think so. I think he's still got enough years. I mean, as long as he can get himself into everywhere that he needs to go. I still think by far he's the best tennis player in the world, especially over 5 sets. He's been proven a little bit towards the end of last year that especially some of the younger guys over 3 sets can get it done against him, but over 5, I mean, he's such a warrior. I have unbelievable respect, and it gets lost a little bit in all the rest of the drama. For his tennis, I think Novak is up there with the greatest player of all time when it comes to just tennis. In terms of that stuff, I genuinely believe he can win another Grand Slam.
Another player we love watching on the court because he's such an entertainer is Nick Kyrgios. Hasn't had much tennis leading into the Australian Open. What are your expectations for him?
Not much, and I don't mean that with any disrespect, but didn't play a lot last year, 8 events in 2021 only. Didn't play in Melbourne because of asthma, didn't play in Sydney because of COVID. Has spent 7 days in isolation. Now, I know he had a court in the house that he rented to spend his time in ISO, but when you haven't had that much tennis, it does make it difficult for sure. Comes up against Liam Brody, the qualifier. So an opportunity in round 1 to get a win against someone who's not going to hurt him too much. I certainly think Nick's well and truly a good enough player to get through Brody in the opening round, but the question is, all around, how is he feeling after having COVID? I mean, he didn't have a lot of symptoms by all reports. He said he felt pretty good, but with no tennis, that's a big one as well. I mean, you want some matches coming into Melbourne Park.
I was going to ask you, that COVID diagnosis, can that take it out of you physically? I mean, it can't help, right?
No, I mean, it can't help. And if you're asymptomatic, I had COVID a couple of weeks ago myself. And, while my symptoms weren't unbelievably bad, they were quite mild, it still takes it out of you. You still don't feel 100%. So, we don't know what his ability to train was like during that period. I mean, he rented a house with a court. Knowing Nick, and I meant this with no disrespect, he could have been playing basketball on that court as much as playing tennis for all we know. I hope he comes out firing, though. I mean, it'd be great to see him playing great tennis. And when he is, he can light up the crowd like nobody else. So I'm sure that anyone who goes to watch him is hoping they can get a real show.
Well, if there's one place that's going to get him going, it's John Cain Arena, isn't it?
Yes.
Because he just finds an energy. I mean, that's the place where he creates magic.
It's different, that place. I mean, I've played some huge matches on that court.
Yeah.
When the crowd gets in there and there's an Aussie playing, it's completely electric. It's different to the crowd that you get over here on Rod Laver Arena. Ground pass holders get in there. We know that when Nick plays, there'll be lines out the doors. It'll be an hour wait to get into that court. So, I hope they turn up, and I hope he gives them something that they can really get behind.
And a bit of tongue-in-cheek saying, he hired the tennis court and might have been playing basketball.
Oh, I'm joking. I
I know.
joke. It's a complete joke. It's just because I know his personality.
Yeah.
And you just, he seems like he's been doing a lot of work in the off-season, probably
Yeah.
more than we've publicly seen for quite some time. So you do say it a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but there's also maybe just that element of truth to it as well.
I'm going to put you on the spot. A
Yes.
men's finalist, women's finalist. Have you got one particular leaning?
I think Medvedev's so hard to go past
Yeah.
on the men's side. After making the final here last year and then winning the US Open, stopping Novak in that quest for the calendar Grand Slam, he's really proven himself over 5 sets. On the women's side, well, if it's not Ash Barty, Naomi Osaka, she was devastating in her round 1 match. And I think, obviously, there's a beeline there, or the chance that this is a matchup in the round of 16 or the quarterfinals. But Osaka's looking happy once again. She's enjoying her tennis. I think that's a really, really tough match if we're heading that direction.
And if there's perhaps a roughie on either side, someone from outside the top 15, always so difficult, but it seems a lot more open on the men's side, at least this year.
Well, there's certainly, when you take Novak out of that top section, the path towards a semi-final opens up for a lot of people. Someone who doesn't fall in that section but had a really great ATP Cup. He's not quite 15 in the world, but Felix Auger-Aliassime.
Yes.
He was dominant, took Canada to that title in the ATP Cup and really started to prove himself. If he's able to keep it together over 5 sets, the physicality, he's starting to develop a little bit more of an all-court game, which I like to see. I think he can really be dangerous.
And on the women's side, there's so many, isn't there? It's just so open.
We get to this conversation every time. You want someone who's 15 as well. Well, Naomi Osaka sits around that ranking.
Yeah.
So this is the funny thing about the women's game, isn't it? I mean, the way the rankings move and go up and down throughout the course of a year, throw a blanket over the field and see where it lands a little bit.
And you and I were lucky enough to call the first Aussie through, Alexander Vukic. Is there one particular Australian, perhaps outside of Ash, that you're looking forward to following?
Oh, I think the group that we've got is awesome. I mean, I was so happy to see Alex win. We have the same management company, so I've been able to actually speak to him a little bit in the off-season and understand what he's trying to go through as he looks to get towards the world's top 100. I'm really keen to see how Alex de Minaur goes.
Yeah.
He's sort of been sitting around that ranking now for a period of time where it's time to make that next step. Quite often in January, because of playing at home, and Sydney the week before the Open, he likes to play at home, and he ends up going quite deep that week that he almost overdoes himself prior to the Australian Open. I think he's probably managed himself a little bit better. He had a rough finish to 2021 after getting COVID, not being able to go to the Olympics, and never really recovered. So I'm hoping that he's been able to put that behind him. He's had a good off-season, hasn't overplayed now. I mean, beat Berrettini as well. I mean, a couple of really good wins during the ATP Cup. So I'm hoping, and I know it's not a name that it's a name that we always throw around. It's not something we don't expect to do well, but I'm hoping that he's been able to manage those few different things a little bit better, and he can come out fully firing here at Melbourne Park.
Grothy, going to be a big couple of weeks. Thanks so much for coming on The Morning Serve.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.